going on? Welcome back to the weekly narrative. Guys, what's going on in chat? Everyone's already coming in, filling up the chat room. Welcome to the Wednesday stream. I'm your host, Jeremy, as usual. Tara, Colin, Karen, Nicholas, Tooled. Who else we got in here? Karen. Did I say Karen already? Vaughn. What's going on, guys? What's going on? Come on in, grab a seat, grab a drink. Let's relax. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics. We're going to be talking about, I mean, there's so much stuff going on right now, right? Let's just, I had to bring on a buddy. To help flesh some of this out. I needed somebody to bounce all these ideas off of. So we're bringing on Taylor from BeacomOfLight today. If you guys haven't checked him out already, it's BeacomOfLight on YouTube. That's with an M. M as in Mary. Let's jump right into it. Let's pull him on and let's have some discussion. This is going to be like a chat-driven discussion too. What's up, Zach? Welcome to the stream. Any of the stuff you guys want to talk about that's going on this week? I mean, there's so much. Just ask us questions. We're going to be open to Q&A this whole time, but we're going to be talking about a few different subjects. So, without further ado, would you guys please welcome Taylor to the stream?
Yo.
Taylor, how's it going, brother?
Good, man. Just reading a little book here. I'm seeing some parallels with the current world, and what's going on in this book. Pretty interesting. I definitely recommend it if you haven't read it.
You know, as an antidote to that book, maybe you can hit up Jordan Peterson's new book. I'm on rule number 11 on his new book. Have you checked that out at all?
I have not, but I've heard really great things. I'd like to think that I've basically heard all of the rules said aloud by him in the million interviews he's done in the past hour.
Right.
What a brilliant guy. What are some of the points that he makes? The book is called 12 Rules to Life. Is that right?
12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. Yeah. It's like a, well, people call it a pop psychology book. It's just a self-help book, but you know, the guy writing it has a lot of credentials and he knows what he's talking about, and he does it in a cool way. Plus, if you get the ebook, the audiobook, he actually narrates the whole thing. So it's like listening to a super long YouTube video of Jordan Peterson.
Cool. I've always wanted to listen to 3.5 hours of Kermit the Frog.
Somebody brought that up in the last chat, and it kind of ruined it. It kind of ruined Jordan Peterson for him. So I'm sorry for whoever that was. But yeah, I mean, dude, there's so much going on this week. I wanted to get you on, and we can kind of bounce some of these ideas off each other and see if we can have a thoughtful discussion on some of this stuff.
You want to hear my silly opinions? Go for it.
Yeah, man, that's what we're here for. That's Jordan Peterson brings us up to start off the discussion here. Jordan Peterson's recent interview with Vice, he kind of points out that, you know, having a out loud thinking, the process of thinking out loud when you're talking with people, there's a lot of, you know, stuff that goes not necessarily. You say some questionable things, right? We can propose something that sounds preposterous, but we can acknowledge that it's not necessarily going to happen. But we're just throwing it out there as an idea.
Kind of like Kathy Newman's entire word for word talk when she was interviewing him.
Shining example of thoughtful discussion right there. The Kathy Newman interview with
So what you're saying is that the lobsters are invading. No, what I'm saying is that men are biologically different than women. That was my Kermit impression.
It was pretty good. Yeah, no, as Tara points out in chat, it's new people. It's not new man, okay? Because as Trudeau let us all know, we can't say mankind, you know, it's people now. It's all about people. You got to be inclusive.
Tangentially, I met a very young, lovely Canadian woman the other day who actually hated Justin Trudeau, and I was taken back. I couldn't believe it. I figured that a young lady such as herself would be fawning over the Abercrombie model that runs our redheaded sister to the north.
Right. Yeah, it's I don't know what to think about that guy. So we were talking a little bit about that Brett Weinstein interview before we kind of came on the chat.
Weinstein. He would be very angry at you.
Sorry, Weinstein.
People start to, well...
Is it a spelling difference? Is it IE for Steen and EI for Stein?
I don't think so. That's a good question, actually. I will look that up briefly, but I believe he is extra careful to make sure people don't call him Weinstein, especially after his distant cousin Harvey started fondling people.
Yeah, I can't blame him for that one bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone else in the chat, but I thought we could start it off light, with some of the biologically driven discussion of Brett Weinstein
Yeah, we'll
and
start it like.
his Jordan Peterson interview, because we got some heavier topics here, and I kind of allude to that in the YouTube channel chat, but we'll warm up to that. We'll let we don't want to bombard the users with the heavy stuff as soon as we come in, but so I kind of came in. I don't remember seeing the earlier parts of the interview, but I do remember most of the later parts of the interview, and generally the discussion was mostly based around how biology plays a role in society today between the interactions of men and women.
Mhm.
Jordan Peterson had a similar interview with Vice lately that's been drawing a lot of interest because they've apparently been not only just a straight up trying to attack the guy with that interview, but they interviewed him for roughly 2 hours, and that we've only seen like 9 to 15 minutes of the content. So we're kind of left wondering, where is the rest of it? Why aren't they showing the rest of it? But what do you think? The point that they brought up, I think both of them brought up, is that we don't understand the rules in society today that govern interactions between men and women in the workplace.
Right. Well, one of Jordan Peterson's one of his points that he made in the Kathy Newman interview that I found to be just quite something that should be quite startling to anyone who disagrees with him, about basic biological differences in men and women making different choices in the workplace and when it comes to professions, when given the opportunity. And that point was essentially that in Scandinavia, where equality of sex has been at the forefront of their lawmaking for the past decades now.
Right.
It's shown statistically that when given the most freedom between men and women to make choices on their own, that 90%, I can't remember the exact statistics, maybe you could refresh me, but the vast majority of men versus women, there are far more men working as doctors. I can't remember the professions that he used, but there are vastly more men working as doctors, and there are vastly more working as nurses.
Yeah, I think he said it was like 17-2 for women to men nurses or something like that, or 17-1 or something like that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's kind of sad that it seems so common sense. Like where was the line in the sand when we kind of threw all this idea out that women are different than men? Like whatever happened to women are from Venus or men are from Mars or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And now they're trying to push the idea that we're the same, but everything scientifically indicates otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's kind of screwing us up. It's really screwing us up.
One thing that Weinstein alluded to on Joe Rogan's podcast, I think it was yesterday or the day before.
Did you say Weinstein?
Weinstein. Did I say Weinstein?
I think you did. I'm not sure. We'll have to go to the viewers for that one.
Yeah, sorry about that, Brett. Everyone makes that.
I did. So now we're even.
Anyway, one thing that he alluded to was that we shouldn't be looking to correct for outdated or we don't need to correct 100% for problems, and what we should actually be looking to do is get closer to a 90% success rate. One example I think he used was socialism, communism versus a democratic democratic republic with some aspects of socialism and capitalism, like what we have here in America. And that being that if you look to create 100% communism in a state, that extra 10%. Actually, I don't know if it necessarily applies to communism, but he was just talking about how what a lot of the left is doing right now is looking to correct 100% for a problem, where that we should be looking for 90%, and that 10% between 90 and 100% creates many other problems that stem from it in some sort of like butterfly effect. Not even butterfly effect, just different problems. I don't know, trans people using bathrooms, right? I don't give a shit what bathroom they use necessarily, but where do you draw the line at that point? Now, can
Mm-hmm.
women or men who become a woman, trans woman, go to a female prison if they're sent to prison? Can they get a grant that's specifically for women? Can they fight in women's MMA? So there's this litany
Right.
of other problems that end up
I think
being created as a possibility if you try and course correct completely for any possible transphobia, as many of them might like to call it.
right. I think their tendency to go for 100% is related directly to their tendency to they live their lives based on absolutes, right? You
Yeah,
can tell just by talking to these people. If you show any ounce of nationalism, you're Nazi. If you just have any bit of whiteness in your skin, you're a white supremacist, and you don't agree with. If you're white and you don't agree with them, you're a white supremacist. They immediately go to. It's a very binary system where you're for or against. 100% either way, you know what I mean? So I don't think they could ever settle for anything less than 100%. Even if you try to convince them that 90% was good enough, I don't think they would settle for that, unfortunately, in any aspect of life. Even if it's like pay gap, they're complaining about what is it, like a 2% pay gap, earnings gap between men and women now. That's the
yeah.
actual real pay gap. If you look at if you actually equate for all the different factors, but still, that's not enough. No, we need to making exactly the same. And I
Right.
don't understand it. I really don't understand where that come from. Do you have any idea where that might have come from? Why they think in such absolutes and they don't have the ability for, like you were mentioning earlier, nuance.
It's identity politics. It's largely driven by the media and and politicians, mostly on the left. Identity politics, with a lot of white nationalism and white supremacy. A lot of that is sort of as Jordan Peterson has pointed out, sort of a reaction. Or Steven Pinker is another guy I've been listening to recently. He points this out.
Yeah, he's cool.
Of course, yeah, of course, if you create identity politics on the left for minorities, the backlash to that, the response to that by many, not by most, is going to be white identity politics. So it's just
Right.
it's two headless chickens sort of fighting each other, if you ask me.
It's like
Um,
the left, they've created this hole that they've kind of dug themselves. The whole of identity politics, which includes racism, white privilege, male privilege, feminism. This hole has all of these things in it, and eventually that hole is going to get big enough that everyone just involuntarily gets kind of sucked into it. Like, we have to participate in their reality now because they've made this such a big deal. They've kind of, it used to be just in their own echo chambers, but now this hole has gotten so large we can't help but fall into it, and we have to now play along with that.
well, one thing that Jordan Peterson also pointed out, and I actually don't feel bad about quoting him a million times. He pointed out that the another irony behind intersectional feminism is that once you start accounting for more and more in regards to someone's identity, for example, a black woman may not be enough. Now we have to focus on LGBT black women, and then
Right.
and where do you stop? Then we need to account for black LGBT women under 5'6". Well, then we need to account for black LGBT. I mean, it's kind of like that game Simon. That's what I'm playing in my head right now. I'm trying to remember all the things that I said to make this joke. Like, a black LGBT 5'6". I mean, that's sort of the game that people are playing in their heads, even when they take it seriously, when they try and name LGBTQ AI plus plus C plus plus Python. I don't even know what they're saying at that point. I mean, how many things do you need to add to it? Because if you keep going, then you end up with the individual, and
Right.
that's
Isn't that some kind
that's
of
sort of
backwards, like inverse reality that they live in like that?
well, that's exactly right. I mean, I almost want to let them keep going with the intersectionality of it, because then you end up with the individual.
That's a really good
People
point.
need
I've never thought of
therapy
it that way.
show called Weekly Narrative. I mean, you'll be the last as a white guy, but
Yeah.
still, uh, that's the irony of it. And, watching Jordan Peterson have a good laugh with his interview with Kathy Newman was excellent. And also when he got her on camera, that was hysterical.
That was good. It's what we were. I think that's what we were all waiting to see.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was patient enough to let it happen. I don't think we can have the discussion show this week. I'm just going to kind of throw it out there. We're moving into the heavy stuff now. I don't think we can have a discussion show this week without talking about the topic at hand, the kind of the whale in the room, right? And that's the gun control stuff that's going on right now. Have you seen some of the coverage that's going on with this?
I have. There's there the ones that stand out the most, the coverage that stands out the most are two sides going at it, and the main arguments are mental health and from the right and gun control from the left. And Trump just came out. I think it was it today or yesterday? Everything's a big blur in this world of politics, but
I think it was today, if I know what you're talking about, the bump stocks.
Came out, and there's an article, I think it was USA Today, and I despise this headline as someone who wishes there was more integrity and sophistication in news, but the headline was, "On gun control, President Trump almost sounds woke." And I hate the word. I think we're just, it's just a trend. But I will at least give credit to that publication, even if they use stupid, trendy words that millennials use.
Wait, which publication used that? Did you say?
At least what USA Today. At least they were able to, but at least they were able to commend what he said. I mean, I haven't heard a peep from too many people talking about him addressing gun control as something that's necessary. I mean, at least he was talking about bump stocks and all these things. And what's your take on it?
Yeah, so he had a bunch of kids in there today at the White House, and they were kind of giving their account of it. And they also had this demonstration. I believe it was at I can't remember if it was down in Washington D.C. I think it was. They had all these kids but the whole situation to me, like, I don't even want to talk about how to fix the situation right now, right? Like everyone can go back and forth on whether it was mental health, video games, movies, violent movies, drugs, bad parenting, whatever it is. But it just seems really, really strange to me that it kind of seems, I don't know if anyone else gets this sense, but it's like CNN and the mass media, it's almost like they were ready and waiting for this to happen because of their response to this. And you have these kids, number one, you have these kids going on TV like 10 seconds after the shooting happens. In some cases, while the shooting is happening, you have these people giving responses to CNN. They're literally like rushing out into the streets trying to interview these kids as they're like being evacuated. I don't know if you saw on CNN, but CNN employees were Twitter messaging people as they were in the middle of the shooting, saying, "Hey, are you safe? I'm from CNN. I want to talk to you." And now you have these demonstrations at Capitol Hill where they have all these T-shirts, these branded movements for these gun control things, just like that. Literally, like, just almost seemingly overnight, they have this quote-unquote grassroots movement that's all anti-gun. And it just seems like from the start of the whole situation that they were ready and waiting to jump on something like this. And it just seems, I'm not going to entertain any conspiracy theories, but it seems fishy at worst, and at best, it's a blatant attempt to push an anti-gun narrative by what's supposed to be a journalist. Journalist outlets, they're not supposed to be pushing narratives. They're supposed to be covering stories and giving us facts and kind of giving us the stories, but they're clearly, it's like there's been a line drawn in the sand. We're no longer news outlets. We're now activists for certain ideologies, and one of those ideologies apparently is gun control, because they just seemingly can't stop pushing this idea of gun control on us now.
Right. Well, I don't know. One reason I do argue sometimes against or for stricter gun laws is that a this kid was tipped off to the FBI by someone else as a potential threat. A B
Several
he's
times, yeah.
19 years old. Yeah, several times. He's 19 years old. You have to be 25 to rent a car from many places. You know, I'm mostly a libertarian, but on this subject, I think about the science behind neurology and the fact that your brain is not fully developed until you're around 25. And
I
I
was
actually
just
think
thinking that, yeah.
that's one of the reasonings behind not allowing people to rent a car until they're 25. So that's one aspect of it. Should we maybe change the law slightly as far as the age restriction goes? A. B. One point that I feel like I haven't heard anyone really bring up is the simple and plain fact that guns are designed to kill. You'll hear the argument often, well, if we ban guns, someone could use a car and just run over people, which has been done. I mean, we saw it in France. We've seen it here in my city, in New York. The difference, though, is that the majority of people who drive cars, forget about that, because I already see the argument against what I was about to say. But anyway, cars are designed to be driven. What is a gun designed to do? It's designed to kill people and stop them in their tracks. I guess
designed to kill something.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly where I would go with that argument, but I think that's something that's important to identify if you're going to have a serious conversation about guns.
Yeah,
Me less says guns are not designed to kill. I'd like to hear the explanation there. What are they designed for? Lighting birthday candles?
I think you're right. They're designed to kill, but they're designed to kill. There is a difference between good killing and bad killing.
Yeah.
Someone's breaking into your house at 3 a.m. and you have a pistol in your bedside. Killing is probably a good thing in that situation. You know, you want to be able to, and unless you have that equalizer in that situation, are they going to kill you? Are they just going to take your stuff? You don't really know what they're going to do. So you're right. I think they're designed for killing.
We live in a post facto gun world. You know, guns exist.
Right.
I think. Of course, I'd like to snap my fingers and maybe change that, but that's not going to.
I think we're too far at this point to be able to say we want to ban guns because, I don't know what the number is, 300 million guns or whatever it was in the United States. But let's just give a theoretical. Let's say we were going to just ban all sales of guns from here on out. Nobody can buy guns anymore. All gun stores close. That's like the kind of the leftist progressives' dream of gun control, right? Let's just do what they want to do, what they're all thinking deep in their heads. Let's skip the age restrictions. Let's skip the background checks. Let's just say we're going to ban the sale of all guns. You still have a lot of guns out of the market, and then you have to consider that 60 or 70, 80% of all the crimes committed with guns, are committed with guns that are purchased or already owned by somebody else. So all these guns are already still out there. You're never going to get rid of all those guns. Even if you eliminate the ability to purchase all guns, there's still more guns out there than you can ever get rid of, that you could ever control, than you can ever regulate. So I don't really understand, if I'm a methodical sociopath and I'm trying to think about how I want to cause the most harm to a school or whatever it is, I'm gonna figure out a way to get that gun. If I'm gonna order one online, through the dark web, if I'm going to find some guy on the street to buy one off of, there's ways to get those. I don't really see what their goal is with the restrictions on purchasing guns. The age thing makes sense, and your argument makes sense because, they're super young. Like you said, you have to be 25 to even rent a car. But I don't think they're not thinking from the mind of a criminal. And
no,
they're not thinking from the mind of a sociopath. Disagree. You know what I mean?
I don't necessarily disagree there. The majority of gun violence in this country is done using illegally acquired handguns, as a matter of fact.
Exactly. So most of the shootings are handguns.
We could also have the argument about assault rifles, which is a semi-bogus term, and the difference between semi-automatic and fully automatic, which many leftist
That's the
folks.
discussion that's so
Um,
simple, but it's never
an
going to be
AR-15,
it's not going to be
well,
settled because
it's
they think
great.
ARs are assault rifles and they're
Well, yeah,
the,
assault rifle. What does that even mean? A military style weapon? I mean, the military uses handguns too. I mean, I don't know. It just
right.
an AR-15 is a handgun with more accuracy, more power, and a bigger clip. That's what an AR-15 is. It's a handgun. It's you pull the trigger once, it fires once. But
It's
aside from that whole debate, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say everything is so nebulous. You have all these definitions floating around that the general public doesn't understand. They don't know what the difference is between like a clip and a magazine, or a fully automatic and a selective fire. They don't, or a semi-auto and a selective fire, for example. They don't know any of these terms. They think a bump stock makes a gun fully automatic. So it's a prime environment for people to be manipulated emotionally, and I think that's exactly why we're seeing the rise of these kids now. These kids are coming out, and they're being the ones used to push the idea of gun control, because it's a prime emotional trigger to, and the shooting itself, of course, was a traumatic emotional experience for everybody. But then you pile on these kids that are on there emotionally, frantically calling for gun control, and nobody knows what's really going on. Nobody knows any of the terms. Nobody knows what full auto versus semi-auto means, anything. They don't know that an AR-15 is a semi-auto gun that's no different than a hunting rifle. So it's just prime real estate for emotional manipulation, I think,
Yeah,
and that's
well,
that's exactly what the media is doing, in my opinion.
I agree. It's all politicized. So imagine imagine all of the talking points on a plate in the middle, and on the right you have the right, and on the left you have the left. Well, without any conversation, they're just savagely grabbing each talking point and pulling it aside.
Right.
I think it's more by the left than it is the right, at least on this issue. But I don't know. What do you think about arming teachers, which is something I've heard also?
Um, I don't know. I can't see. I don't think teachers are the right people to arm. I mean, if you're someone that has the temperament to become a teacher, first of all, statistically, you're more likely to be a woman, and yeah, if your school is under assault by an unknown number of assailants with weapons, I don't think they're gonna a teacher generally. I'm stereotyping here to some degree, is going to have the temperament to be able to react to that
Yeah.
with a rifle. I think it's definitely a good idea to have some people on campuses that are armed. I don't know if teachers is necessarily. I don't know why teachers is the one that we pick for that. I think just because it's assumed that they're going to be in every classroom. You know what I mean? But first of all, not all the teachers may be qualified to have these guns. I think we should definitely have somebody on campuses that are armed. I don't want to use this as a crutch, but the quote that somebody from the NRA came up with a while ago, saying that the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, is true to a degree. If somebody's got a gun, and if nobody else around has a gun to stop that guy, you're going to call the cops, which are just other people that have guns, to stop that guy. So
Yeah.
the quickest response to somebody with a gun is somebody else with a gun. Whether a teacher is the right person to arm with those, I don't know. Maybe give it to like the gym teachers. Maybe they're more inclined to handle that and be equipped to that situation mentally. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I guess something that's important to bring up is that if there's a guy like this guy in Florida, or the guy at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, or the guy in Vegas, even though the jury's still out on what happened in Vegas, and we can talk about that later. If you're intent on doing something like that, and you have enough ammo, it's going to be very difficult for someone to stop you unless you're blatantly obvious about it and make mistakes and showing in not being secretive in what you want to do right until trying to accomplish the goal you're set out to do. You're gonna have we're all gonna, no matter, even if you're a Navy SEAL, you're gonna have a hard time killing someone who's intent on doing something like that before they kill anyone else. That's the world we live in. We live in a country that's actually mostly quite safe, which is why it's easier for someone to just get out there and shoot someone in the head, because you don't have schools that are locked down where you have to walk through a metal detector and get a pat down before you go in. Luckily, and that's the world I want to live in.
Right.
if this continues to happen, you start to wonder what's right. How do we mitigate problems like this? I think that mental health is a huge issue that's underlooked. I think it's important that anyone out there look into just community and getting out there and having real life interactions with people. And I think that's ironic considering we're Skyping. But I think that there's some serious psychological damage that's done to young people in this country. And I think you and I are maybe just a little bit older, where we did actually get out and play outside. And I think we might have been the last
Every day.
generation to do that. Yeah, like I didn't have I mean, I don't. I got a cell phone. It was like a flip phone. StarTAC. I don't know if you remember that shit. It was a flip phone.
You remember beepers? Did you have a beeper in school?
I think I had a pager for 6 months, and then the cell phones started coming out, and I got a StarTAC cell phone when I think I was like 12 or 13, just so my mom could call me. But anyway, but the social media and the constant YouTubing, and of course it's ironic. So if anyone's out there watching and you're young, make sure you have some time in the real world aside from just watching us amazing dudes talk to each other. But real life interaction, there's something to be said that people who are missing that there's psychological damage going on with them. And there's a book that I haven't read yet, but I kind of know the synopsis. It's called Tribe, by this guy Sebastian Junger, who is a journalist. He did some correspondence overseas in, I think, Syria, and he wrote this book talking about how important it is for humans to have human-to-human interaction and to feel like they're a part of something. And I think that's one problem with the internet, is that it's isolated so many young people into their own little world. And when you mix that in with being bullied at a young age, or you mix that in with anything else that alienates young people, whether it be something modern or something of old, and then you mix in the easily available weapon that this kid was able to get, you have a perfect storm there. So we obviously have to tackle each issue individually and talk about what's best. But what the media is doing with the sensationalizing and painting with a broad brush, just saying, well, this is the answer, gun control is the answer. Well, that's not constructive.
Yeah, I think your point, and what I was going to kind of say off of that, is just that this situations like this, we have a tendency to try to simplify it. Like human beings, we have an uncanny ability to try and rationalize things, right?
Yep.
So we want to just be able to point to one thing for our own comfort and be able to say, well, this is why this happened. This is why. We always ask why, consciously and unconsciously. And we can't do that in this kind of situation because, as you just pointed out, all that stuff may have played a factor in this kid's eventual violent outburst. But the point is that there's probably 100 different factors that go into the creation of somebody that goes into a school and shoots people up. Now you could create a pie chart of it, and maybe mental illness would be a bigger part of that pie. Maybe the availability of guns would be a slightly larger part of that pie. But you can't just aim at one part of that pie and take that out and then expect your situation to be solved. You know what I mean? You still have the other 99 factors that are pointing this kid and these people in that direction, whether it's lack of social interaction, terrible parenting, the psychotic drugs, the availability of weapons, the lack of support structure in the schools, the tendency to immediately prescribe a cause is, in my opinion, as alternative media, and this is kind of what I'm trying to do as an alternative media source, is to not be that reactionary, not be that emotional about it, and not immediately say, hey, wow, okay, this is a gun control issue. This is obviously President Trump's fault. Like, no, let's just take some time. Let's study. Let's look at what's going on. At least take a day to mourn the victims, for Christ's sake, and acknowledge that there are more factors that we can even comprehend going into the creation of something like this. And what we can do, I think the best thing we can do is to just look at the rise of this kind of event over the past few decades and say, okay, well, what has changed over the past few decades? What has changed to facilitate a situation like this? You know what I mean? Like, have guns become more available? Not necessarily. Are schools becoming more prevalent? No, everyone goes to school still. So what are the causes for the increase of this behavior over the recent years, and not necessarily.
I have one point I want to make quickly.
Yeah.
Do you remember the guy's name in Florida?
The one that just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
What was his name?
Nicholas Cruz.
And do you remember what he looks like?
Yeah. I don't even want to say it on my stream. I didn't want to say his name,
right.
But since you asked.
Now name one of the victims.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I said that on my last stream.
It's disgusting the way the media is so willing to throw out people like this, their identity immediately. Forget about the identity. Like, I think it's important, and it's conducive to know someone's identity, especially if it played a role in their terrorism. If this guy was a terrorist, I don't think we know his motives necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's something. Side note: terrorism means violence in the name of politics or religion, for the most part. To achieve there's a motive behind it, right? Like in Vegas, people want to call that guy a terrorist. We don't know what the motive was. Anyway, it sickens me how the media is so willing to show the face and name of this guy, and kind of in a psychotic way glorify killing someone. And I don't know if it was him or someone else recently who shot up a school or committed mass murder who said, I'm going to be the next one. I'm going to be the next famous guy. I'm going to be all over news. And what we really should be doing is we should say, you belong in oblivion now. You belong removed from the minds and reality of people.
Exactly.
Send him to hell where he belongs. Tip him off of a cliff. Whatever. I'll help. We can all go and push him off a cliff together. But we don't need to be seeing this guy's face and name. And if anything, we need to be seeing the faces and the names of the victims.
Yeah.
And remember that.
That's the strongest point I think that we can learn from this kind of stuff, and that's what I brought up in my last stream. And it's that I was at the gym yesterday, and they had Fox News playing at the gym. I don't know why. Maybe it's a conservative gym, but I literally saw this kid's name on the Chiron at the bottom of the screen scroll by like 50 times as I was trying to do my stuff. And it's like, hey, Boba's leaving. Boba, I saw your super chat, by the way, brother. Thank you, man. It's going right toward the trebuchet. But I can't believe, because these are the same news outlets that years ago when shootings would happen, like after the Virginia Tech, everyone was saying after Virginia Tech, don't politicize, don't publicize the guy's name, don't publicize the guy's face, don't talk about the shooter, this and that. And then the same news outlets, here we are now, years later, they're just blasting this guy's name all over the place. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a huge component to that, because if you think about it, it may be hard to put yourself in these shoes, but if you're a super depressed kid and you have, your parents died recently or something like that, and everyone makes fun of you at school, you may have these fantasies that are fueled by psychotic drugs or not, but you look back on people like the Columbine shooters. I was about to say their names. I'm not going to say their names. Not that we don't know them, but you look back at those and you think, man, it's been 20, 30 years or whatever since that happened. Like, if I do something like that, I can be remembered too. Like, those guys they went down in history. You know what I mean? Like, you can have an impact. You can go out with a bang and create a name for yourself by doing something like this. And they fantasize about their heroes, quote unquote. These are heroes to them that have done this, and they've stood up for what they believed in, and they've tried to make a change, as violent as it is. So we keep creating these people, these icons, these names and faces, these personalities for other people to look to, and to what's the word that I'm thinking of? They want to copy them. You know what I mean? And it's terrible. And especially now you have situations like this where this kid lived.
Yeah.
Most of the time they kill themselves. This kid lived, which was surprising. So he's going to be infamous for the rest of his life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to dissect this kid like a lab rat. You know, we need to get Jordan fucking Peterson in there to get inside this guy's brain.
Right.
Maybe he wouldn't be the best.
The television event of the century.
Oh, Jesus. Shouldn't have even brought that up as an idea, but you know, we need to dissect this guy like a dead frog. You know what I mean? But
maybe it's a good thing that he is alive, because then you brought up a good point. We can do that. We can ask him. We can talk to him, and you know they've already said that he's he's got remorse for the situation. So that's not necessarily in line with what we'd expect from the Columbine killers. There was no remorse there. So maybe this was a little bit different. Maybe we can start to figure out some of the nuance, like you were talking about earlier, some of the nuance of this situation. And we can look at that pie of factors that caused this and maybe try to point out some of the ones that were actually relevant to create this kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start to play a dangerous game when it comes to finding out what is in people's brains and what their psychology and reasoning is, because on one hand I could say, well, let's live in a dystopian sort of Minority Report precog life or world where we can determine whether someone's going to do something like this premeditatedly or not, but you're infringing on people's rights to mental sovereignty. It's like,
right.
Well, you know, how do you get inside someone's head? I mean, there are so many people in this world that snap, and the only way we can truly evaluate the actual physicality of neurology and why people have certain adverse psychological effects due to their neurology is to literally look inside their brains. Mm-hmm. So maybe in the future we'll be able to evaluate people, like kind of getting like a doctor's checkup, where we can evaluate how well their prefrontal cortex is operating at that point, and certain responses to, I don't know, to find out if you're a sociopath, to find out if you have empathy and sympathy for people. And as far as trying to mitigate problems like this or situations like this before they happen, I definitely think there's not enough emphasis on mental health. I forgot who said this, but someone recently reminded me that we brush our teeth twice a day, yet we don't do anything for our brains twice a day. And one thing we could be doing is meditating, or forcing ourselves to get off the couch and exercise, or forcing ourselves to be. I mean, this motivation and sense of community is lacking so much, where people start to feel like they're getting this human interaction from, again, I know it's ironic, but kind of what we're doing, or less than that, which is
the best we can do from 5,000 miles away.
Yeah, that's true. We're doing pretty damn good here. And I will probably shake someone's hand tomorrow, actually, physically, and I think that'll set off some nice responses in my brain.
You got to get some of those chemicals going. I mean, I don't know what the exact statistic is. This isn't something I could be quoted on, but somebody was mentioning it was one of these popular figures in psychology or sociology today. They were saying that like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, even just 10 years ago, if something serious in your life happened and you needed help, the average person could go to. They would have 5 close friends that they could go to for help with that situation. And within 10 years or 20 years or whatever it was, maybe one of my viewers knows what I'm talking about. They did that again today, not today, but recently. And the average person has 0 people that they can go to.
I heard that recently too.
They have 0 close friends. Like, we have this technology and all this amazing stuff. We have Skype and phones, and I can talk to you from 5,000 miles away, but it's like the personal connection that we have with people is dwindling. And now you have people that are being in school shootings, they're in closets, and they're they're making videos of each other, like their commentary in the closets as they're in a school shooting. It just seems so inhuman. Like your reaction to a school shooting should be like panic and oh my god, what's happening, and crying and this and that. Not this is student reporter here for CNN. What's your reaction now? You know what I mean? Like it's almost sickening to some degree, and we've lost a sense of connection.
That's the reaction. It's bizarre that that's an actual reaction from some young people. Is the first reaction is to get on their phone and film it. Now
that's what I thought.
There's two sides to that, of course. The one side is, well, they're filming it to maybe preserve some sort of last moment, or maybe to send out a broadcast to try and make people aware of what's going on. But I wonder if the same mental response is had in a situation like that when someone is just Instagramming a regular day. Is you know, if they get an orange frappuccino instead of a strawberry one or whatever the fuck, their first reaction is, oh my god, I have to Instagram about that.
Right.
Well, is that the same thing that's happening in their brains when the school shooting is happening? That's scary, and it speaks to the psychology of young people. And one thing I've been doing recently, and I'm almost 30, so these kids are they're growing up in a world where they don't know the world without these touch screens and all this video and interactions and stuff. So you and I, we talked about how we at least had a little bit of childhood without it. But what I've been doing recently, and this is as someone who's almost 30, I've been putting my phone outside of my room. You know, I don't even have my phone inside my room when I go to sleep, and I purposely don't check my phone for the first hour of the day. For the past week, I've been reading. I've been taking an hour in the morning to have my coffee and read. No phone. I don't even touch the damn thing, and it's already making me feel better. It's already making me feel like I'm accomplishing something and not addicted to this little device. You know, we're essentially cyborgs with these little devices. We are the future that so many science fiction authors have talked about, where we have infinite knowledge at our hands all the time. And with great power comes great responsibility, to quote, Peter, what was that?
Spider-Man.
But yes, to quote the great scholar, Uncle Ben.
Peter's Uncle Ben, yeah. Yeah, no.
Was it Uncle Ben, or is that the rice guy?
That was Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben's rice.
Yeah, I think that was Uncle Ben as he was dying. But you're right. It's like the closer we become to these, the farther we become from actual real people in our lives.
Right. Yeah, and we're getting these little dopamine responses that make us feel like we're getting the real human connection, but it's just it's fake. It's a facade. And then you see the booming of these like sex dolls. You know, these fake. I mean, they're getting better and better. People are paying thousands of dollars for these ones that they make with like the same viscosity as a person. You know, the same like texture and stuff. And we're really getting closer to just putting on VR goggles, sitting there while some machine, goes at your bit, and it's terrifying, and no real interaction, and you just die, sucked off by an AI.
We're 10 years away from just being plugged into AI, and that's it. Like we're not going to come back, unless our batteries die. We're not going to come into the real world anymore. We already have zero friends. I mean, how much worse can it get? The average person has zero close friends to go to in a crisis. I mean, what?
Yeah.
How much worse can it get? You know what I
mean? Right. There's comments here talking about atheism and religion. I'm interested about that.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those.
What are your thoughts there?
Let's see. Brandon says atheism hasn't caused any deaths. Anyone with any world something can do as things. Okay, well, the second half of his sentence is not very legible, but I think the general tone, the general message is that people don't kill in the name of atheism. And I would tend to agree with that, although we've seen in recent cases, I think that guy who shot up that church in Texas, or wherever that was, he was kind of anti-religion. And what I'm afraid of in today's culture, and especially now with the media narratives, the legacy media narratives of they're kind of going against any religion that isn't Islam,
Except for
They're
Fox.
yeah, right. Except Fox News, the one bastion of the Christian hope. They're trashing the idea of religion, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing. You know, I used to be religious. I'm not really religious anymore, much to my parents' dismay. But I don't think it's a good thing to try and be a hostile towards religion. I don't think it's inherently bad, but I do agree that people kill in the name of religion. At the same time, I don't think we should try and get rid of religion, whether it's Christianity or Islam or whatever it is.
Well, one point I like to bring up is that atheism is kind of a silly word to call something, because atheism just means without God. You know,
I
it's
hate
the
having to
opposite of
use
theism.
that word, atheist. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we don't call people non-astronomers. No, we don't
Exactly.
call people non-whatever. I mean, they're just not an astronomer. We don't even address it that way. So when I hear people talk about how the communist dictators were atheists, many of them, with the exception, I think, of like a bit of Mao and Pol Pot, these guys weren't killing in the name of atheism, because atheism is not, like, it doesn't have a name. So if anything, they were trying to
Right.
eradicate other religions.
Mhm.
So you can't describe some sort of textbook. There's no atheism textbook. I myself am an atheist, and
Richard
but
Dawkins has an atheist book, you could argue.
what is that?
The God Delusion.
Well, I mean, but that's not the atheist textbook. Like, you know,
No, I
Christians.
know what you mean. I know. What you mean. It was just a
Yeah,
joke.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess I've had a lot of serious discussions about religion, and I just can't I can't believe in a God. I see no evidence for there to be one. One thing I think is an important distinction to make for anyone who's watching, who maybe thinks there's a negative stigma about atheists, or is religious themselves. There's a broad definition of atheism, which is someone who doesn't believe in God, and then there's a more narrow version or definition of atheism, which is someone who asserts that there is no God. I am not that second ilk. I am someone who is open to the possibility, who thinks it's possible, but I just see no reason. I had this discussion with someone the other day
Isn't that
where,
agnostic? What's the
uh,
difference between what you're describing and
well,
agnosticism?
the difference is that agnosticism contains within the definition a your reasoning as to not believing in God, which is that you don't see any evidence for it. But doesn't discount the possibility. That's really the definition of agnosticism.
Hmm.
The broad definition of atheism is someone who doesn't believe in God, which is different than claiming there is no God. So
Hmm.
just because I don't believe in a God doesn't mean that I don't think it's possible. I just think it's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I've come to not to go down a religious tangent or anything, but you know, I used to be a pretty hardcore Christian. I don't prescribe to the religious idea of Christianity anymore, the Christian God necessarily, of a separate entity of one superior being. I do have an idea of God now, which is more of like an internal God is kind of inside of you, or you are God. Each individual is kind of a God, but that's kind of a whole separate rabbit hole that I don't want to
Well,
go
that sounds
down.
boisterous. You are God?
Huh?
Well, in that case, if you are God, Jeremy, I mean,
Well, so
I
are
might
you.
have to make sure I
So are
don't
you,
do what I
though.
was going to do in the shower later. Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, no,
I
no.
don't know.
God is inside you. Okay, He's inside
Well, I'm
all of
going to
us.
go.
Let's since we're on the topic, I'm curious, and I know you. I'm really interested in hearing your perception on this. Is why do you think it is that we have or what I perceive to be a disproportionate amount of violence related to religion, um, when you look at like Islam versus say Christianity or
Yeah.
any other major religion? What I know you. I've seen a lot of your YouTube videos on this. You like to study. It looks like you're very interested in the Middle East and Islam. I want to get your opinion on that. Why do you think that is? Is it simply because there's more violent text in the book? that they read? Is it a cultural thing? Is it an evolutionary thing? Is it due to where they live? Why do you think that is? And am I even right in that assumption, or maybe I'm wrong?
Well, there are certainly many factors. Everything has nuance to it. There are very few discussions, intellectual discussions, religious discussions, philosophical discussions, political discussions that don't have some serious baggage they have to unpack, if you will. One subject where I think there is absolutely zero discussion is that the Oreo is the superior dessert cookie. But aside from that, okay, I was hoping to get a bigger laugh out of that because I'll get you off of those Fig Newtons, Jeremy. I will, man. You got to stop eating those things.
I don't eat any cookies, man. I'm on protein bars. I eat protein bars every day.
There you go. But I bring up Sam Harris's point often that religion is a term we use like the term sports. You have badminton and you have Muay Thai kickboxing. They're both sports, but the only thing they have in common is breathing. Well, religion is the same way. You have Jainism and Buddhism that preach little to no violence. In fact, the core of the doctrine of Jainism is complete pacifity. So a lot of these people wear masks so they don't inhale a bug on accident. They're constantly watching where they're walking so they don't step on an ant. Whereas Islam has spread the faith by the sword. Muhammad commanded armies. He was a commander. They would kill people who didn't convert. And it says to do these things in the scripture. There's also something called aggregation in Islam, where whatever happens later in the Quran supersedes what happens at the beginning. So the Quran starts off nice and peaceful. It starts off with Muhammad in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, and by the time he gets to a city called Medina, after he's taken his pilgrimage, which is, I think it's called Hajj, or don't quote me. Anyway, then it becomes a bit more violent. Then it becomes...
So it's the opposite of the Bible.
You could say so. And there are some key differences within Islam that's different than Christianity or Judaism, which is that the Quran claims to be the perfect word of the Creator and the final word of the Creator. So Muhammad was the last and final prophet, according to Muslims, right? They acknowledge Jesus as a prophet of God, but no one else. Muhammad was the last guy. He's the last guy you need to listen to. Jesus, okay, your time's up, buddy. We liked you, but you're back there now. We're the best. And it also doesn't allow for reform. So again, when it says this is the perfect key. Creator, yeah, that's very key. The Bible has the New Testament. So those are a couple of differences scripturally and doctrinally. Probably sounded like a pretentious asshole saying doctrinally, but
I've never heard that word before, so I'm learning. There you go. That's why I have you on, man, because I want to learn new stuff.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, we'll have a very short conversation then. I'll tell you all stuff, and you'll learn it, and then you can move on to someone else. But I will say, to pat my own back here, that self-deprecating humor is a sign of intelligence. So see what I did there? Kind of. Anyway.
I see. Yeah, that's a
yeah. But then there's geopolitical factors in when you talk about people like Osama bin Laden, for example. Well, one of his claims is that the West is evil, and he lists out certain political reasons. But at the end of the day, his reasons were doctrinal. Use that word again. His cited the Quran. So. A lot of leftists here in this country will talk about the Noam Chomsky narrative, which is essentially that the West is to blame for all the evils committed by Islamic terrorists. But the UK, if you want to talk about the fundamental countries of the West being certain European countries in the US, we haven't been involved with the Islamic world for more than a couple hundred years, 300 years, if you will, at the most. And actually, when I say 300 years, I'm just talking about the history of America in general. Right. Why is it that Islam has conquered an entire subcontinent? India, Pakistan, 20% of people in India are Muslims. A lot of people don't realize that. Right. You look at places like Africa, North Africa, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Egypt, all over the place. Of course, Egypt, though, because it's much closer to Israel and the Holy Lands and Saudi Arabia and such, but even further south, all the way to Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country in the world, 300 million. Why is Islam so popular there? And I will recommend watching an interview I did with a friend of mine named Kayvan Afshari, who's an Iranian American, on my channel on youtube.com/BeacomOfLight. But he basically explained to me the real cultural appropriation of Islam within Iran and the greater, what was the greater Persian Empire, where Persian history had been going on for thousands of years, and then Islam comes along and essentially dominates or forces people by the sword to convert to Islam. And a lot of Persians were pretty badass, and they said, no, no. And then a lot of them were slaughtered, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But they retained the language. A lot of them retained certain Persian holidays that predate Islam. And we're not talking about cultural appropriation like Kim Kardashian wearing dreadlocks or whatever the fuck. We're talking about people, Islamic scholars, quote unquote, people like Reza Aslan or Karen Armstrong, these people that are Islam apologists that go out there and they say, they talk about the mythical Islamic golden age. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were quite accolades made by Muslims. But to say that, to associate it with Islam as though that had a profound influence on the creation of certain, algebra, for example, is patently false. And many of the great quote unquote Islamic thinkers that were actually Persian, and one of them being this guy Ferdowsi, who is essentially the Persian Homer, and not from The Simpsons, mind you. But he was Persian. He wrote an epic novel. I forgot what it's called. Go watch the videos on my channel if you want to learn just an insane amount of dense information regarding Islam, the Middle East, Iran, Persia, foreign policy, the Ayatollahs, the nuclear war, the Cold War, all this crazy stuff. Go to my channel and watch those videos. Really fascinating stuff.
So if I was to summarize your explanation there, in both the aspects of the expansion of Islam and the doctrine, or I can't even remember the sweet word you used based off of the word doctrine, but
doctrinal.
There you go. It seems to be it's just got more of an aggressive undertone. It expands aggressively, it spreads aggressively, it has aggressive undertones underneath it, and that's kind of why maybe we see more aggression and religious attacks based off of Islam than we do say Christianity. Is that kind of
how many? We're not talking about the Jehovah's Witness that are running over people at a Christmas market in Germany. We're not talking about the Amish that are shooting people up in a nightclub in Florida.
Yeah.
Now I do want to mention that actually kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier. What a lot of people on the left will say is, well, there's white terrorism. They like to use this word, white terrorism. So for example,
I've heard that several times.
His name's Cruz, so I don't know if they can really call him white.
He's a white Hispanic. Did you know that was the thing?
I don't know that's the thing. I don't care. I'm getting sick already. But when you talk about like what's that Dylan? What's the guy's name? Dylan Harris, the kid who shot up a black church, wherever it was. Whatever his name was. He said that he wanted to kill blacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's motive. He had an intent based on, ethnicity in this case. That guy was a terrorist, right? Las Vegas, different story.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the left will paint this guy in Vegas and some of these other killers as white terrorists when they're not terrorists if you don't have a political or religious motive something like this or what have you. But B, to act as though there's some sort of like to use the word white. Well, yes, they are white, but to use the word white as though it's akin to using the word Islamic when talking about Islamic terrorism is patently absurd, as though that there's some sort of white label. that there's some sort of white playbook that says go out there and kill them.
Right.
No, there's not. In Islam, which is a doctrine and not a race. I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir to you and many other people, but Islam is not a race. It's an ideology. Anybody, white, black, whatever, can be Muslim. So there's this conflation by a lot of leftists that say, oh, well, you're lambasting and smearing a whole group of people. Well, you're criticizing a religion. If I were to say, Muslims are terrorists, that would be awful,
Right.
But there is Islamic terrorism, and it comes from the doctrine. Many of these people, we have to take them at face value at some point. There might be other factors, but most of the people that are committing these atrocious acts in the name of Islam are doing just that. They're doing it in the name of Islam.
Exactly.
So I guess, like the Uzbeki guy, the Uzbeki guy here in the city. I mean, Uzbekis, to my knowledge, are white, pretty much. I mean, they're Slavic. Their origin is from the Caucasus and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
He was an Islamic terrorist. I don't hear anyone calling him a white terrorist. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's what I loved about the whole cycle of the Muslim, quote unquote Muslim ban, and then people calling that racist. It's like, it's not a race. Although I would agree with one of my viewers in chat. He says there is a race that has a predisposition to be Muslim or to the faith of Islam. Would you disagree? I mean,
where is this?
Let's see, by Dinosaur Head 11, he says there is a race that has a predisposition to the faith of Islam. Would you disagree?
Predisposition? Well, the Islamic doctrine started in Arabia, so of course. But I don't think their race has anything to do necessarily with why they have a predisposition for Islam. They just happen to also be Arabic.
That's one of the interesting things with religion that always comes up that I like to ask is that you run into these people who are hardcore Christians or Muslim. It's would you follow the same religion if you were born in a different area?
Right.
It's just based on where you're born and the culture that you're in. It's not necessarily part of an inherent truth that you experience in society. It's just how you interpret that based on what people tell you to interpret that.
I just want to address a quick comment. Someone talked about the black Muslims in Africa, and I guess I need to do more research on the subject, so don't quote me here, but so Islam started in the 7th century, right? It's about 1400 years old. I'd like to look into the cultural aspects of pre-Islamic Africa and ask that in a similar fashion as leftists will say that we'll talk about certain cultural appropriation, that they address cultural appropriation to people that are low on the oppression Olympics rung of being African or black. And they address it in the sense that Islam, from starting in Arabia, and we're talking about a doctrine, not a people, took over Africa and commandeered cultures and replaced them with Islam. I don't hear anyone talking about that.
Dare you say colonialism?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But no, only white people do colonialism. I don't know if you know that.
Right.
But the entire world was colonizing other places. And my friend Kayvon, who I did this interview with, which again I'm going to plug it one more time. Brilliant guy. I learned a lot. 3-hour interview on my channel, BeacomOfLight, on YouTube. He talks about how he used the term civilizational Darwinism. And the idea there is essentially that you had certain civilizations, like ones in the UK and Europe, that at a certain time, or if you want to make sure that non-whites are included, Greeks are. I mean, does anyone even know what that? Like, where are the boundaries? I'm sick of identity politics. It's funny how a lot of Jews are lumped in as white when a lot of them have the same DNA as Muslims, yet they're brown or Arabs. Anyway,
nobody knows.
We can go down a rabbit hole talking about race, but at the time, in the past, however many millennia, civilizations in the UK, Holland, Belgium, let's put Greece in there before the UK, Holland, and Belgium, Italy, if you will. These places and Arabia with Islam. This civilizational Darwinism took place, and these people were motivated in one way or another to get out and colonize and command. But everyone's done it, including the Arabs. So when the leftists say, "Oh well, Europe has ruined the world and it's only white people that do this stuff," that's patently false. I ask that they look up the Barbary slave trade. I would ask that they look up the Arab slave trade, which is essentially the same thing, where I think over like 2 million white Europeans were taken from Europe and sold into slavery into the Arabic world. No one talks about that. And I understand that we learn about American history, so we don't know too much about the slavery in the rest of the world. I understand that as well.
Right.
But it's important to understand the bigger picture here, which is that we're all humans, and slavery has existed across all races and divides.
This is a perfect segue into one of the things that's on my list of stuff to talk about today. And first of all, I want to make sure you have time. I know we've already been going for over an hour. Do you got more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
To
I go off on tangents with religion, especially.
No,
Passionate.
it's cool. I like to hear that. And I can
I'm
definitely
gonna
tell you're
start preaching
passionate
in the
about that.
South. I'm gonna start preaching in the South, preaching the word of God.
You could form a cult in no time. I could see it already.
Uh-oh.
Do you have a little bit more time to go into our next subject, and then we'll call it? Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, because what you were talking about was a perfect segue into what I want to bring up, and that's the other recent popular topic of this movie, The Black Panther, and it being part of Black History Month, and the kind of narrative surrounding the movie Black Panther. The main narrative that I've seen anyway on like, for example, these the woke folks Facebook page, guys like Sean King, people who are kind of pushing the pro-black, anti-white narratives. They're saying that this fictional world of Wakanda, which is the subject of the movie Black Panther, where black culture has lived untainted from colonialism, white colonialism, they're kind of pushing the idea that all you need to succeed and to become a flourishing, vibrant country is to A, have your own resources, B, not partake in slavery, and be culturally and ethnically homogenous, because it's literally this movie is kind of a portrait of what the alt-right kind of wants in real life. The movie is about a all-black society that's uninterrupted from the outside world, that doesn't take in any outsiders, and that remains ethnically and culturally homogenous and isolationist. So what you're talking about with like the slave trade and stuff, it relates directly to what they're kind of trying to say with this movie. And then if you look at Africa today, and you say, okay, well, if black Americans, they say slavery is the reason that America is so prosperous, because we enslaved the blacks. Well, if that's the case, then why didn't that Arab slave trade turn into a bolsterous, crazy rich society over there in Africa? What happened to all the slaves they were taking in Africa, and why didn't they become rich simply because of that over in Africa? The narratives underlying this movie seem to kind of dissolve away when you look at reality and you look at history. And I haven't seen the movie, but I've read enough and heard enough about it. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but that's kind of the premise behind the movie, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the validity of that theory, that slavery makes you rich, and that the only thing you need to become a prosperous society is to have resources that aren't plundered by whites or colonialism, and to be culturally and ethnically homogenous.
Well, I haven't seen the movie. I'm an adult. So, I thought it was a kid's movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was based on a comic book.
That's what I thought.
I didn't know that we were going to start taking Stan Lee's side projects and then turning them into Hillary Clinton's next campaign ad. I don't know. I don't know what. Like I don't know. I really don't. But
That's what
yeah,
they're
I
doing.
watched. I listened to Sargon of Akkad do his take on the film,
I
and
listened to that as
yeah,
well.
one thing he did parallel was how someone like Richard Spencer, who's a white identitarian, who wants an ethno state, which is absurd if you ask me. Sorry to any fans that are disappointed by that, but you should, anyway, I don't want to chastise your fans, man.
I just lost half my viewership. What happened?
Yes, sorry, I know. Well, I know you eat fig Newtons, but I didn't know you were pharmacist. Although they do go hand in hand, right?
Right.
Who the fuck likes fig Newtons? I actually don't mind. Anyway, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, he was talking about the parallels between what someone like Richard Spencer would want and this movie, where Black Panther, Wakanda, or whatever. I thought that was just the take on the word woke, which is just like Wakanda, and I don't know. I feel like
that could be. I never thought of that. That's a good point.
I just want to start giving everyone the finger and just walking around saying like, shut the fuck up, like just shut up. Shut up with your words that I don't understand. Okay, I'm old. I like the English language. Anyway, yeah, they want to create this society where it's been untouched. It's basically an ethno state. I mean, if you look, I haven't seen the movie, but I don't think there were any white people there, and that's the whole point.
Right.
But the main things I'd want to comment on about this movie are the hyper politicization of identity politics in Hollywood. And
exactly.
how I mean, you have people like what's his name, J.J. Abrams recently talking about how, and Sargon made this point also, how there need to be more females or minorities or whatever in movies.
More female directors and stuff.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is, well, why don't you give up your position as director for a black woman midget? Dude, what are you doing?
You could be the change that you want to see in the world, JJ.
White male. You're a freaking white male. Have you seen that video? AIDS Skrillex.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah.
Now I'm revealing how many YouTube rabbit holes I've gone down just watching.
If you haven't seen, everyone on my channel seen AIDS Skrillex. You're in perfect company. Don't worry.
You freaking white male. Anyway, so there's just this. I guess. I want to promote Jordan Peterson more and more because he articulates the nonsense and nuisance that is and of. Oh, now I'm getting ahead of myself here with language, but he exposes and articulates the fundamental problems within identity politics and how we shouldn't let the pendulums swing from what used to be Jim Crow laws and slavery and all these things and colonization and other legitimate grievances that should be addressed. We can't let the pendulum swing with course correct.
Right. Now white people are evil. I think the pendulum's already far in the other direction. I mean, white people are evil,
Yeah, well, it's it is there's a noticeable change in the zeitgeist, or at least in the hive mind or whatever it is, where you will walk around and feel different. You might walk around and start noticing race, and that's an evolutionary trait. If you buy a yellow VW bug, you're gonna start seeing more yellow VW bugs.
Exactly.
When you tell someone not to think of a pink elephant, what are they going to think of?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just thinking of bacon right now. If you look at this comment section,
I know.
I'm going to cook up some mean strips.
No vegetarians here, guys. We're both hardcore meat eaters.
What are you going to give me flowers? No. Twigs, sticks.
Yeah, no, that's it's. Well, can't even remember what I was gonna say, but the ethno state that they want to push with that movie, it's so the massive amounts of irony that come out of that, where you have this constant pushback against the idea of the alt-right and their white ethno-state, and now you have all these black people going to movie theaters saying, this is what I've always wanted. This is the black dream right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we all want. This is the dream. This, the ethno-state all black. We were never disrupted by colonialism. But I think the premise of it is pretty stupid, to be honest. And the idea that all it takes to become rich is enslaving another race and having resources. Like, there's plenty. I can't remember who I watched that said this, but this is stolen from somebody else. So don't. This isn't an original thought. Japan became very wealthy and well established with very little natural resources. Germany has almost little to no natural resources. The argument that you hear today from the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, is that the reason Africa is so backwards and messed up and still living out of mud huts right now is because Americans went in with colonialism and we took all their resources. That's their argument, is we took all their resources. And this
it wasn't Americans, it was Europeans.
Right, yeah, right. Europeans that came from boats from different areas, you know what I mean? They have this resource called vibranium that nobody else had, and they were able to hold on to that, and the reason they're so successful is because they were able to hold on to that resource. So, having a resource and not becoming a slave to another culture is all it takes to be wealthy in society, and I think that's... It's incredibly ironic, because if these people actually understood what they were watching when they went to this movie, they might see that not only do they agree with some of what, for example, the alt-right says, but they would be a little more nationalistic, because the movie has strong undertones of nationalism, where you're defending your country, you honor your ancestors who are handing down this tradition within your country.
Right.
And
if you want to talk about the slave trade and colonization and so on from like an evolutionary perspective, one common phrase that you hear that I think would resonate is that necessity is the mother of invention. So
exactly.
So when you look back throughout evolutionary history and you see that the first modern man in our current state came out of Africa, right? Well, some stayed behind and populated there and continued to breed, and others migrated into Europe and Asia, and then across the Bering Strait into Alaska and Canada and North America, and even down into Mexico and all these different places. A quick side note, Native Americans actually hold the same DNA as, I think, Siberians, which is mind-blowing if anyone doesn't know that, because then you start thinking to yourself, well, hold on. Native Americans didn't evolve here, and no one was here before the Native Americans? Well, well, in that case, do you really call them Native Americans? I mean, we all came out of Africa, if you want to go that far back. Anyway, but if you look at the parts of the world that ended up migrating and dominating and colonizing, these were colder climates. These were places where vegetation was scarce and resources were scarce in general, and necessity is the mother of invention. So boats were created, and this need to get out of there and look for resources and colonize and spread, which is inherent in everybody. That's not specific to a certain race. Was acted upon, and in Africa, believe it or not, with the exception of the Sahara Desert, in the jungles and other parts, it's abundant. You have vegetation that grows. There's plenty of heat. It's close to the equator. Blah blah blah. So many of the people who have stayed there and evolved there didn't find the need to expand and travel and so on.
Well, that's one of the arguments for why
I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I don't know. I'm sure someone could
That's one of the arguments that I've heard a lot for why Europeans have succeeded and why Africans have remained kind of why they are right now, because Europeans had to deal with winter. Right. Africans don't have a concept of winter, so they don't know. They didn't have to evolutionarily anyway. They didn't have to plan ahead. They didn't have to store food. They didn't have to adapt to that changing seasons all the time. You know what I mean? So
right.
There's that. And to go back to your point of necessity as the mother of evolution,
invention.
Invention. Sorry, they had all these resources. How long were the ancestors of American or of humans in Africa? Tens of thousands of years, right? That's where we all came from. They had these quote unquote resources there for tens of thousands of years, and it was only up until like 150 years ago or whatever that white people, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, that white people started to quote unquote colonize that and take their resources. Well, why didn't they flourish in that time where they had all this abundance of resources and the freedom to do whatever they wanted with those? They've had these resources undisturbed for tens of thousands of years. Why aren't they light years ahead of European culture? And I think that kind of ties a little back into the winter thing. But anyway, there's an interesting question in chat from Edward. He says, there are cultures today that have been relatively isolated and haven't changed for thousands of years. Tradition hasn't really allowed them to evolve. Trade and stuff can help. What do you think? Now, my opinion would be you're absolutely right in that trade helps evolve, and that goes against the narrative of the movie that isolationism is a good thing and makes you superior technologically. Because if you look at like Japan, for example, they didn't have a lot of trade going on when we first encountered them, and it wasn't exactly a challenge. Cultures who can trade have the ability to not only keep up with the rest of the world, but advance their own technology based on the advancements of other people. So it goes against the narrative of the movie, I think, and I would agree with that. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't have much to say about trade and sovereignty necessarily. I mean, I would maybe in another podcast, but I think the important thing to talk about with movies like this is, despite what many people will tell you, this is a better time for Black people in this country than there has ever been. Not like we have a long history necessarily,
it's a fact.
But we're, certain headlines have said this is the first Black superhero movie, and that's wrong. There's Hancock, there's Blade, there's I mean, however many other films.
Right. Countless examples.
With Black leads, let alone superheroes. So that's nonsense, and no one, we were talking about this earlier. In the 90s, I don't know when Blade came out. I actually really enjoyed that movie because it was really edgy.
Oh, it was
when
awesome.
I was younger. I didn't even think about Black. I wasn't even thinking about this shit.
Exactly.
And I don't mean to get emotional, but I don't want to think about that. I want to think about what's cool. I want to think about what stuff I like. I don't want to think about. I don't want to watch a movie and think, oh, well, they must have put an extra Black person in there to, trying to show that they care about equality.
Diversity quotas.
They don't. Many of them don't seem to care. They've gotten equity and equal outcome confused with equal opportunity. A lot of people want to see 50% of the people on television be Black, or let's say they want to see 25% white, 25% this, 25% that. But what they don't seem to realize is that white people are 65% of this country or whatever. Black people are 12%. Right. If you want equality or equity even, then an equal outcome would be to have 12% of Black people, 12% of people on TV be Black.
Well, that ties in perfectly.
But you don't. They want more. They want equal outcome. They want the socialist, communist sort of Marxist view of the world where everything is even past the point of actually being even. They want perceived evenness.
That ties in perfectly, and I think we'll wrap it up on this one. And somebody just brought this up in chat, but Chris Rock in his special, me and you were talking about this before the stream started. He says specifically that he wants to see equality in the world now, right? And the way that he envisions equality is that he wants to see more white mothers crying on TV about their children being killed in shootings. So that's their idea of equality, is the equal amount of white kids being shot as black kids being shot. Not the narrative isn't let's figure out why so many black kids are being shot. The narrative is let's get more white people being shot to equal the number of black people, right? I think that's the wrong way to. It's probably more of a comedic way to look at equality, but
he's always pushed the boundaries. Chris Rock, he is a stand-up comedian, but there was definitely a hint of ignorance, in my opinion, in what he was saying. Only in the fact that if he understands that he's influencing people to actually base certain political beliefs, off of what he's saying, and in addition to what other comedians or performers say about politics and influence and how that influences other people, I definitely see a bit of difference, which is, first of all, some basic statistics are that more white people get killed by police in this country than blacks. Now, of course, you have to talk about
people.
Capita. Sorry?
I was just saying, that's a fact.
Yeah, but you do also have to talk about how per capita you're however much more likely to be shot if you're black. Now, my question would be, why? Is it inherent racism? Is it systemic, police racism, that they're all like any cop who shoots a black guy is racist? Well, that's a possibility, but is it more nuanced than that? Quite a bit. And I think from the data we're able to look at and from the polls we're able to do and so on, the one large statistic that people like Chris Rock don't want to seem to talk about is that black people are 12% of the population. 6%, half of the population of blacks, which are men, commit 50% of the murders in this country. These are I'm not making this up. I don't want this to be the case. I don't want anybody to be murdering anybody. But if people are going to murder each other, I'd like us to do it at the same rate so we don't have this confusion. but these are Department of Justice statistics. Does that make black people more likely to interact with cops? Okay, well, duh. Well, there you go. There's the first factor in the equation of a police shooting. Interacting with police. That's number one. And then you can go down a list of other reasons and so on. And I think somewhere mixed within the dozens of reasons for police violence against blacks, somewhere in there is racism. The problem that I have is not being able to point to it and fight it where it lies. And the way that many leftists want to do, and apparently Chris Rock wants to do, is to follow the same liberal bubble narrative and the liberal echo chamber narrative, which is it's racism, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's sad, and you look at other statistics. When you look at people saying things like that, you have to realize, if you know the statistics anyway, you realize pretty quickly that they're refusing to acknowledge those statistics. And if you're that passionate about something that where you're going to make a special out of it, it's going to be the topic of one of your specials, you've probably done a little bit more research. You're probably aware of the fact that cops are actually less likely to shoot someone because they're black, because they're afraid of being ostracized and fired and being called racist. And you're probably aware of the fact that white people are, just by sheer numbers, more likely to be shot.
Well, you should also just mention quickly about the police being less likely to shoot a black person. That's you didn't make that up. I've seen that report too. These are these are studies funded by universities.
Right.
It's not.
It's not.
They actually tested police.
Right. These are it's the best to our extent of knowledge that we have of these statistics. That's what they say, is that cops are less likely to shoot black people because, we don't know the actual motivations behind it. I'm prescribing that based on my ideology that they're afraid of being called racists, they're afraid of being fired, et cetera, et cetera. The cultural pressure, the quote-unquote Ferguson effect, that we are less likely to now police black neighborhoods because we don't want to be called racist. So it's super counterproductive in my mind. It's not gonna get them the outcome that they want.
Well, again, I think it's important to talk about pattern recognition and how this is ingrained in us. If you were to ask a simple question to anyone on this earth who has some logic, and that question is, if you are walking down an alleyway late at night and you see a silhouette of a person or multiple people, let's say, and you can't see their race, or let's say you can't see their gender, but I think what I'm about to say would give that away. But the outline of the silhouette is a bunch of, or one heavily muscled, tall, big brute types. Maybe it's a female. I've seen a couple of them, these rugby ladies walking around. But anyway, the roller derby types.
You run into the rugby team in a dark alleyway at night.
The roller derby types, Anyway, lots of tattoos. Anyway, if you're walking down this alleyway and you can't see the race of the person, are you more likely to turn away and go the other direction if it's a bunch of silhouettes of big men that are obviously men, or little girls dancing around, tiny little, ponytails, little 3 feet tall little girls?
Right.
Well, it's completely logical to turn away if it's a bunch of men than if it's a bunch of little girls.
Right.
And if you start hearing the statistics that black people commit more crimes in this country, murder and so on, and violent crimes, and you see stereotypes, but their stereotypes are there for a reason. Aging drivers being one of them. You're from Sacramento, you're probably stuck behind a Honda or two. And I'm making jokes, people. I'm making jokes, but
it's called comedy. People, relax.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. It might not be good comedy, but my version.
We're trying.
Yeah. So when you hear the statistics, when you see the stereotypes perpetuated, when you see violence being glorified in rap music, and when you see on the nightly news, and now I do think there's a problem with the media sensationalizing certain things, but when you see the nightly news and you see black face after black face, it's, and I don't mean blackface like when a white person puts on a black face. Again, my jokes suck. But when you see all these people committing, when you see so many committing crimes, it's a natural evolutionary pattern recognition to turn the other way if you see a black guy walking down the street rather than a white guy. Now, Here's another fact. If I were to see a white guy dressed like a thug with baggy clothes, gangster swagger, teardrop tattoos, whatever. White
two
guy.
pit bulls on chains.
Well, let's not go that far because that's fair.
Is that too much?
Yeah, too much. Let's say you see a white guy with tattoos, thug-looking fella walking down the street looking mean, and then on the other side of the street you see a black guy, a huge black guy in a suit,
right,
walking around with a confidence and not walking, like this. I'm gonna cross the street and walk next to the black dude.
Right.
I don't know about you. So there are other factors. It's not all about race.
Exactly.
It's a bunch of different, and it just bothers me that that we're even talking about it, because I just want to. I want to talk about
sad?
the berries.
It really is sad.
South Park. Like, remember the '90s? No, remember Now music. Remember Now, all the addition of CDs. Remember CDs? Remember?
Yeah, we were talking about that, and I think we can both agree that the times were definitely less politically charged back in like the 90s, or at least 10 years ago even, the early 2000s and stuff. And
we can go back to it. We can try and get there. We have to have the conversations. It's important.
It's sad. It's sad. I really miss it. I miss it. But we guys like me and you, society should be glad to have us on the front lines, to be going to these events and talking to
You're
people.
very humble. Very humble.
And yeah, no, I mean, you know, not a lot of people could do what we do. I could just say that.
I'm the most modest person. I'm the most modest
I
person.
think during this stream I said I was God and that society should be lucky to have me. Yeah, so maybe I'll stop there. But anyway, I think, dude, we went almost 2 hours. That was pretty good. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and we'll definitely.
Bladder is full.
Yeah, I definitely need to take a piss as well. So we'll call that there. If you guys, you know, definitely check out BeacomOfLight on YouTube. I'll have his channel in the description there. He's got a lot of YouTube.com/BeacomOfLight. He's got a lot of really good discussions on his channel. Rising YouTuber just like me, and he will be back. I can guarantee that for future chats. So don't be afraid if you're, you know, thinking you're not going to see him again. But Taylor, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you coming on. And guys, if you haven't already, hit me up on Twitter and Facebook /Weekly Narrative. Taylor, if you got anything else you want to plug, go ahead and plug it up right now.
Subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing a lot of filming in the upcoming weeks. If I get the chance, so I'm going out of town. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Miami for a couple of days just to unwind. I'm going to do some I'm going to try and do a video or two down there talking to some of the people in Miami Beach about what they think about politics. I want to talk to some Cuban people and talk about life under Fidel Castro, try and get the message of anti-communism out there a little bit more. I'm going to go to. I'm going to be on the West Coast eventually. I was thinking maybe we could link up somehow when I do some videos out. But I do want to let you guys know that, well, first of all, subscribe to my channel, youtube.com/BeacomOfLight. M as in Mary, of Light. That's a play on words. I'm tired of having to explain that. But subscribe to my channel, and I will be doing some videos. I'm going to go to Harlem here in New York City, where I'm based, and I'm going to interview some people about the, you know, just to get African-American opinion about the Trump administration and the state of African-Americans in this country. I'm going to be going to a really gay neighborhood here and interview LGBT people to get their take. You know, so I'm going to try and play the identity politics game a little bit, where I go around and I get people to speak out and voice their opinions who are members of these completely homogenous communities that are all supposed to think alike, right? These communities, we keep using this word community.
Right.
But yes, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll be looking out for those, and yeah, I'll be back on Sunday, guys. So anyone else who's you know, one of my warriors here in chat, I'll see you guys on Sunday. Taylor, thanks again, man. Good luck with those videos. I'm looking forward to them. We'll see you guys on Sunday. Peace out. See you guys.